Hi everybody, I hope you're all doing really well. So today I am back to talk about my reread of North and South by Elizabeth Gaskell. I recently did a video where I talked about my reread of Jane Eyre as part of Victober. It's one of the books that I was planning on reading as part of my little project of going back and rereading old favourite books of the year, seeing whether or not they actually are still firmly favourites, in order to consider would I put this book on a top 10 list of my best books of all time. And yeah, I'm basically repeating the same formula with North and South. Not only just doing that, but also trying to see what a reread would do to open up different themes of North and South, different things that I hadn't considered before. And yeah, this isn't a review video as such, but more just me kind of regurgitating all of my random thoughts that I had while rereading this book. I feel like North and South is a little less well known than Jane Eyre, so I'll just quickly get into some plot discussion. In North and South, we are focusing on the main character of Margaret Hale, who is a southerner originally from a little village called Helston, though she spent most of her teenage years growing up in London with her aunts and uncles. However, upon the marriage of her cousin, who she was closest to, she ends up returning home to Helston, where after a few months of summer with her family, her father, who was the minister there, tells the family that they are actually going to be moving. He has some fundamental disagreements with his church, and so is going to leave the Church of England, give up his rectory, and move up north to this fictional industrial town called Milton, which is kind of based on Manchester, in order to set up a new life with his family, working as a tutor. Margaret and her mother are really taken aback by this. They didn't know it was coming, and so they now have to adapt to this new life in the industrial north, Margaret having to learn a lot about industry and the different ways of living up north as opposed to down south. Like I say, she has this very idyllic image of the south, which contrasts very heavily to the grimier, darker, dirtier, in her view more poverty-stricken north, where everybody just seems to be struggling. And she ends up having some idealistic disagreements with one of the owners of these mills, John Thornton, who I know is very well known in the Victober sphere as being one of the swooniest Victorian men. How much of that is based on Richard Armitage's portrayal of him in the BBC miniseries from 2004, I leave up to you to decide. But very much the introduction that I'd had to North and South was that this was a book that was very much about this North-South divide, about the merits of the South over the North. And so as somebody who read this book for the first time in 2019, someone who was born in Yorkshire and had lived in Yorkshire all of my life up until that point, I was instantly very, very defensive of this southern main character coming up north and basically deriding it in a very like why I order kind of way. And it actually really turned me off this book the first time that I read it. The second time I read it was in 2020, hot off of reading Wives and Daughters and really enjoying it. You'll probably know from my Victober video that I did way back when in 2020 that I read North and South for the second time and ended up falling in love with it, mainly due to completely falling in love with John Thornton and the main love story. You know, romance is a very good way of getting me into a book, and it definitely worked this time round. However, I have since read North and South this time last year and now of course this month, and on these two rereads of this book I'm actually picking up on different things, and I wonder how much of that is that now I am a northerner who is living down south, so the complete opposite of what Margaret Hale was experiencing. Maybe it's that a couple of years more life experience have really opened my eyes to certain things that weren't open the first time that I read it. But I'm noticing more and more that this is a book that is definitely about binaries, but actually wanting to turn them on their head. As the title suggests, we are talking about the North and South divide and whether or not there are fundamental differences between life up north as opposed to life down south. There's also a bit of a good versus bad dynamic, morality versus immorality. You've got the disagreement between the workers of the mills and then the mill owners, and who is right and who is wrong. And actually, I'm noticing more and more with Elizabeth Gaskell how much she's really trying to complicate these notions of these binaries and really asking, is there such a stark difference, or is it just a little bit more complicated? And I think that's what I come down to with this story. More than it even being a love story, this is a coming of age story in which a young girl is forced to have to complicate her very set narratives of the world. And this is something that hits Margaret pretty much from the beginning of the book when she first comes back home to Helston. Things that she thought were idyllic and peaceful no longer are. And this starts off with her coming back to her parents. Although she does definitely idealise Helston and the families around and the nature and just the beauty of the landscape, she's noticing more and more that her parents are not the perfect people that she'd always imagined them to be. She notes especially how when she's in London, she only ever thought of the good things to do with Helston. And when she comes back home, she's hit with the reality of like the bad humours of her parents, times when they would kind of grate on her a little bit. But when she's away, when she's in London, she only ever thinks of the good things about her parents. When she moves up north, once again, she romanticises Helston in her mind as this idealistic place that she's been forced to leave. However, later on in the story, she's taken back to Helston and she notices how things are just not the same as they were in her mind. And I feel like that's definitely something that I can relate to. When you spend chunks of your time going up and down, back to your family home, then back down to where you currently live, I think you do find yourself kind of falling into into this romanticisation, only to discover when you go either way, there are definitely difficulties there. But what is it that makes you push through them? And I think through the course of North and South that Margaret starts to realise what it is that actually makes a home to her. And it's not the location, it's not a collection of things or landmarks, it's the people that you are surrounded by. Home is where your people are. And whether she is in Helston or in London or in Milton, these places are nothing if she doesn't have good people around her. When she returns to Helston, it's without her parents and things just do not feel the same. There are new people there who she has no connection to. And so despite the fact that she's in familiar surroundings, it feels completely unfamiliar to her. I remember when I was like 18, 19, 20, when I'd gone to university, every now and then I would go back to my old school. And I remember when I was a kid and older students would come back, I remember feeling really excited about it and thinking, oh, I can't wait until I'm older and I can do this and I can be like a returning alumni and go back and see all the students that I used to know, see all the teachers I used to know. And actually, when I came back as a university student, it actually felt very detached. I didn't feel like there were so many people that I could connect to. I just didn't feel like I had that strong of a connection because I wasn't there every day. And I think that's something that you can't really control. Whereas at the same time, I have a group of school friends and I have a group of uni friends who I don't get to see every day. I don't even really get to talk to them on like WhatsApp or Messenger every day. But when I meet up with them, regardless of where we meet, it feels like no time has passed. And I think that really does go to show that it is people, not locations, that really make up a home or a place of belonging. At the end, you're just left with this idea of what else can you do but just make new traditions. In regards to the question on like binaries, north versus south, workers versus owners, I feel like that's something that with this book I haven't completely made up my mind about. I definitely feel like Elizabeth Gaskell is pointing us to this idea of things are a bit more complicated than we might initially take them, that everybody has something that they have to deal with and everyone has a reason for their own beliefs. And I do find myself at the same time wanting to support these workers and their unions at the same time as recognising that they don't always go about things the right way, if there even is a right way. Feeling a bit disgruntled with our main character of John Thornton for being quite dismissive, but recognising that through the book that he does change as well. And also just loving him as a romantic interest because he is a bit of a sweetheart. A gruff sweetheart, but a sweetheart nonetheless. And I feel like my views on this are just going to evolve over time. I think this is a moment where I just feel like things are just a bit complicated for my little brain, or just my non-confrontational brain who just wants everybody to be happy. It doesn't want everyone to get on. Also, having recently read Jenny Uglow's biography of Elizabeth Gaskell, that really made me think about how well Elizabeth Gaskell does craft her characters. I feel like she just has such a good read on real life personalities and how to kind of translate that into fiction. Her characters do feel very real. Their follies and foibles, just generally acknowledging that people are complex and sometimes they do behave a little bit silly, while also being pretty consistent with her characterization. I remember finishing that biography and just thinking that Elizabeth Gaskell is a person who loves people and really loves drawing them out. And that just really comes through with this book. But yeah, these are the random little thoughts that came to me while reading North and South for the 4th time. In terms of whether or not I think this book is a favourite, it's definitely a book that I do love and I do want to go back to and I do enjoy. But I also don't know if this would make it onto my all-time favourites list. Definitely a 5-star book, definitely one that I really enjoy. As I say, I go back to it so frequently. But I don't know if I have the same like drive and emotion and pull to it as I did to something like Jane Eyre, where the love that I feel for that book was just so strong and I was so drawn to it. Anytime that I wasn't listening to that audiobook, I just wanted to go straight back to it. I didn't have that same pull with North and South. North and South is one of those books that I'm like, this is very, very good. I really love it. When I'm there, I'm enjoying myself. But I can kind of put it to bed. I can feel at the time like, yeah, I could discuss this for a long time with people. I could have some good debates with people about this, but also I can leave it. It's not become a part of my personality. So yeah, I'm not sure this one would make it on there, but definitely it is still one of my favourite Victorian novels that I've ever read. So yeah, very incomplete thoughts there across the board, but that was my experience of reading North and South this time round. I'd definitely love to hear more thoughts from other people about this, people who are a bit more knowledgeable, especially about Northern industry and especially these conversations over the unions. I feel like the more I read this, the more that I want to learn about it, because I feel like a lot of my like just not being very sure on where I stand is just ignorance and me just needing to learn more about it. Do let me know any of your thoughts about North and South. I would love to hear from you. I hope you're having a fantastic day and I look forward to talking to you again soon. Thanks. Bye.